This is the most important new car to launch in 2022 here in Australia. It's the Tesla Model Y, the first mid-size SUV from American electric car maker Tesla. And of course, if you're watching this video from overseas, the Model Y is probably already on sale in your market, but it's taken some time for the cars to get here to Australia. Now, last year, Tesla managed to sell over 12,000 Model 3 sedans here in Australia. Despite EVs being fairly niche in this country, it was the top-selling electric car by far, and the Model Y being effectively the SUV version of that car, we expect it to do even better if Tesla's Giga Shanghai facility can build enough of them for our market. Now, in today's video, I'm going to tell you whether you should join the waitlist for a Model Y. When the car launched onto the Australian market a few days ago, 7,000 Aussies bought one in just one day. So there is now a waitlist. Should you join it? I'm going to tell you all the good things and all the bad things, and that's an important disclaimer. I personally love electric cars. I think they are the future, but I'm neither for or against any manufacturer. I'm for good cars and against bad ones. So where does the Model Y place? What does it get right and what does it get wrong? I'm going to tell you in today's independent, unvarnished review of the 2022 Model Y, which I've brought along in entry-level rear-wheel drive form today, right here in Sydney, Australia. Before we get started, hit subscribe down below and the notification bell. For most owners, getting into the interior of the Model Y will happen via your phone. Tesla sets up the app on your phone when you take delivery of the car, and it's pretty fully featured. You've got locking and unlocking, of course. You've got climate. You can see the location of the car on a map. You can schedule charging, and there's a range of other functions as well, including opening the boot, the frunk, and the charge port, all from the app. But there is a backup credit card style key that you can carry with you and place down here in the center to start the car. So certainly nice to have both options, I find. Now, because this car is so similar to the Model 3, more than 90% of components are actually shared between the two of them. It's no surprise to find that the interior is virtually identical to that of the Model 3 sedan, but we are sitting higher. The seat installation and construction, the rails beneath it are actually different, and that means that the elevated seating position goes beyond just the fact the body's a bit higher, the seat within the body is also up higher, so your view over the road is better than that in a Model 3 by quite a lot actually. Now, looking out across the dash, you're also treated to excellent forward visibility, and that's something that Tesla really gets right in this car. But also the mirrors are big and you can see behind you well via that function, and the fact there are blind spot cameras, a bit like a Hyundai, Kia or Genesis, so that's quite cool. Unfortunately, rearward visibility isn't great because the aperture of the back window is really quite narrow, so if you're looking behind you, it's not that easy, so I guess it is good you do have those blind spot cameras then. The interior design of this car is very minimal, far more minimal than virtually any other car on the market, apart from the Model 3, of course. And that's because virtually everything is driven through this 15-inch touchscreen here in the center. Now, for reference, the car that I'm testing is running software version 11, and we've got 2021 navigation data in this car. But the vehicle I'm driving is brand new. When I collected it, it had 22 kilometers on the clock, so really nothing has been tampering with this car. What you see is what you get. Thankfully, the software that this car runs is really quite intuitive and easy to use. We've got Google Maps driven navigation, so of course that works perfectly. We've got Spotify and a range of other entertainment apps and gaming as well. Now, unlike some companies, you do have to option premium infotainment. It's free for the first 30 days, so you can see whether you'll get use out of it. Of course, stuff like Bluetooth media streaming is all included, so you don't need the premium stuff. But the car has its own cellular connection, and continuing to enjoy the full features costs you $9.99 a month, or $120 a year. Now, in some ways, I actually appreciate this more than, say, Audi Connect Plus, where you get it free for 3 years, but then they won't tell you what it will cost you after that point. At least with the Tesla, you know it's going to be $120 a year, no matter what. Now, as I mentioned, the system's fairly intuitive. It's very fully featured. I could do a whole video unpacking every single menu, but all you need to know, I think, is that while it can seem a bit intimidating at first, because it's so different to the infotainment in rival cars, you very quickly learn how to use all of the functions, and it's actually one of the best systems out there on the market, apart from one thing, and that's something a lot of Model 3 owners, including here in Australia, have complained about, and that's there's no secondary screen or head-up display. Your speed is displayed here in the center, And it's just not as intuitive as being able to see your speed in your line of sight, because you do have to take your eyes off the road to see what speed you're going. If you've got adaptive cruise control set, it's less of an issue, but driving around town in a city full of speed cameras like Sydney or Melbourne or elsewhere in Australia, you're constantly looking at your speed, and I wish there was just a slim little display in front of you like in the Model S, or a head-up display like in many rivals, but there's not. So that's definitely something Tesla could fix in future. Nice steering wheel, vegan leather, but it feels like the real thing if I'm honest. Nice little dials to control various functions, autopilot, and also your media over here, that all works well. Pleasant stalks, the weighting of them feels really expensive, and overall interior quality feels quite decent, at least here up front where everything feels screwed together just as well as any other car. There's only one interior quality problem on this vehicle, and that's that the rear seat upholstery is squeaking. So the vegan leather is squeaking on the back bench against something on the side of the car. I'll see if I can capture that on GoPro later so you can hear what I'm talking about. But otherwise, quality seems decent, at least improving, if not quite at the bank vault level of some rival vehicles like the Volvo XC40 as one example. Speaking of vegan leather on the seats, we have the same seats as the Model 3. They're quite soft and plush, but they do have enough comfort and support to, I guess, keep you feeling healthy and happy over long distance journeys, but I wish they had seat cooling. Less of a problem on this white leather, which is an option. Black is standard, and in my battery exhaustion test of the Model 3, I found that that car's black interior gets really sweaty and a bit disgusting on a hot day if you don't have the air conditioning blasting, particularly because this glass roof is standard. It's big and beautiful, and it doesn't have a center divider, but in summer it does heat up the cabin. As you can tell, it's cold in Australia right now, so it's not a problem. You do have heated seats though, front and rear, plus full electric adjustment, including four-way lumbar, which is great, so I feel really comfortable. Also got dual wireless charging, 4 USB-C ports for the car, lots of practical touches, big cup holders, big bin down here, large bin between the seats. Of course, there's no gearbox on this vehicle, so lots of space, and big flockline door bins as well. So all in all, I think the interior, you would say, is pretty nice. There's just a couple of misses where Tesla could improve in future. A small display for the instruments, seat cooling, perhaps cloth seats would also be good as an option to help in the sun here in Australia. But I guess summing the whole thing up, I like it. Let's check out the back seat. Here in the back of the Model Y, you can see that space is really good, particularly compared to similar combustion rivals like a BMW X3, Mercedes GLC, Lexus NX. The legroom in particular is much better. For myself at 6 foot, I've got heaps of space behind my own driving position, and there's a flat floor, so you could actually get someone in the center if you wanted to. In terms of headroom, it's pretty good beneath this glass roof. I've got several inches to spare, so getting adults or tall teenagers in the back of the Model Y will be no problem at all. We also have the nicety of a flip down armrest here in the center with 2 cup holders, and in fact the whole thing folds forward on spring loading, so you could carry skis nice and easily, particularly if you go for the performance, which has all-wheel drive, even better for the snow. Most of the material quality is actually really good, soft touch doors all round, just some scratchy plastic in black on the back of these white front seats. We've got air vents though, which is good because, as I mentioned, in summer this glass roof can mean the interior gets a little warm. 2 more USB-C ports back here, map pockets in both of the front seats. But I thought I'd give you a couple of bits of trivia about the Model Y. The first is that HEPA filtering in the cabin is actually standard, and the second is that there was a recent payload upgrade for the vehicle up to 562 kilos, and that was an increase from 390 originally for the Model Y, which was really low for the class. So good to see that's been bumped up a little bit. So that's the interior. Next up, let's talk cargo space here at the boot, but also at the front, because this vehicle sits on a dedicated EV architecture. Now, I quite like this midnight silver paint. You do have to pay a little bit extra for it. White is the only standard color, whereas red is the most expensive. Every other color sits halfway between white and red. I think it comes off actually looking quite nicely, and this is the best color I've seen for making the proportions of the Model Y look better. I personally don't think it's a beautiful car, but I think in midnight silver it actually looks quite smart. Now, you get a standard power tailgate, and this is really kind of like a liftback proportion, this car. It's an SUV. I guess you'd call it a coupe SUV, but it does mean that you have this big cutaway here. It's not a traditional wagon, it's not a brick like a Volvo or something, and so if you're planning on carrying around a lot of tall stuff, you're going to suffer a little bit here. But the boot is still nice and big. 854 litres is Tesla's claim. I have a strong sensation that might go up a little bit higher than the window line. That being said, the window line is quite high. Let's do the soccer ball test, of course, and see what this boot actually measures in at. But just looking at the space, it's big, it's square. Getting your suitcases in here will be easy, and there's a huge amount of underfloor storage as well. I reckon that's got to be contributing to the 854 litres. Nice spot to put dirty stuff if it's not going in the front. Plus we got holes off to the left and right. We've got a nice Velcroized carry case for your charging cable. In fact, let's open that up because I did have some questions on the YouTube about what's in here. So what we have is the travel charger, which is certainly a nice to have. Yes, got our travel charger here. There was some question around whether it would be included with the car. This one's got one. Always good to see. Now, a lot of glass back here, but we do have these toggles which fold down the rear seats and they're spring loaded, really nice, works well. And there's a control up here to close the power tailgate and really big struts, so it's certainly not going to fall over in the next few years. That quality seems pretty good. But speaking of quality, yes, I know everybody goes on about shut lines with Tesla. That being said, they're not perfect on every manufacturer. It's not like Tesla stands alone, but I will note that the shut line on this side of the tailgate is noticeably thinner than on this side of the tailgate. Unlike a lot of competing manufacturers, Tesla doesn't make any combustion cars, so all of its models sit on true electric vehicle platforms, meaning there's plenty of space here under the bonnet for a front boot, or a frunk, as some people call it. At 117 litres, it's actually one of the bigger frunks out there. You can see that it's properly sealed. It's just got hard plastic lining, so you could put dirty stuff in here. You could go to Bunnings, get a couple of bags of mulch or something, and this would be a place that you could carry those without having to dirty up the carpeted boot. So always a nice option to have. Compare that to something like the Porsche Taycan's frunk, which is actually carpet lined, so it's meant to be somewhere for more expensive bags. This is more heavy duty. There is a tow hook in there as well. Otherwise, it's fairly featureless under here. No sound insulation because of course there doesn't have to be, although there is a space to fill up the reservoir for your windscreen wipers, and you close it just like a conventional bonnet on a car. When it comes to running costs, it pretty much goes without saying to say that the Model Y is cheaper to run than something like an Audi Q5 or a BMW X3. But it's also cheaper to run than its electric rivals, and that's because it's more efficient. Because it's more efficient than its rivals, it doesn't need to carry around as big a battery. Because it's not carrying as big a battery, it's lighter. Because it's lighter, it's more efficient. So you get into a kind of virtuous circle, which other manufacturers are trying to get onto, but Tesla is kind of already there. And that shows the lead that they've had in doing battery electric cars for longer than most of the legacy manufacturers. Speaking of battery, the rear-wheel drive has a 62 kilowatt hour lithium iron phosphate battery. About 60 kilowatt hours is usable, and that's good enough for a 455 kilometer WLTP range. I'm going to put up on screen what we actually managed to get in the burbs and in the country with this vehicle on test. Now the performance model, that has a different battery chemistry altogether and a bigger battery. An 82 kilowatt hour nickel cobalt aluminium battery. That delivers a range of 514 kilometers WLTP. So a little bit more range for performance, but here's a quirk. Because of the different chemistry, you should only charge the performance to 80 or 90% regularly, whereas the LFP battery in the rear-wheel drive, you can safely charge that to 100% a lot of the time without causing battery degradation. Now, if you can only charge the performance to 80 or 90, the range difference becomes virtually zero between the two cars day to day, around that 450, 460 kilometers. So that's kind of interesting. Bit of a difference in the charging speed. The rear-wheel drive can only charge at 170 kilowatt DC, whereas the performance can charge at 250 kilowatts. But because the batteries are different sizes, 15 minutes of charging on a supercharger will give you about 260 Ks of range. In terms of cost to fill at home, they'll both cost you $15 or $20 for a full charge. On a Tesla supercharger, where you're paying 51 cents a kilowatt hour currently, you're going to pay around 35 to 40 bucks to fill this car. That would be from 0 to 100, which of course you don't do very often. And on ChargeFox or EV, they now charge 60 cents a kilowatt hour, so it's getting up there a bit. you're going to pay around the $40 to $45 to charge these cars. That being said, they're still less than half the cost of petrol or diesel in a rival vehicle, even with inflated charging costs lately. Now the warranty, that's 4 years or 80,000 Ks on the vehicle, so a bit shorter than a lot of rivals. The high voltage stuff is warranted to 8 years, 160,000 Ks for the rear drive, or 8 years, 192,000 Ks for the performance. And that warranty actually guarantees at least 70% of the original range after that 8-year period, and all of those kilometers are done. So the moment of truth, driving the new Tesla Model Y right here on Australian roads. And as we like to do on this channel, we've done a really proper job of it. We've done hundreds of kilometers in the car, around 600-700 Ks, picked it up brand new from Tesla and threw it straight into work. So yesterday it was all about suburban driving. We had the car at our test track for photography, and now we're out in the country. So just outside Goulburn on difficult, challenging roads, doing a bit more filming. We had our range tests. That's a video coming to the channel soon. Drove the car right down to 0 kilometers range. We've done some performance testing as well, so hopefully I've got a bit to say. So what do I have to say? Well, the first thing is that this is, in general, a pretty good car to drive. Even if the design of the thing isn't for you, most of the dynamics probably will be, and the bang for buck that you get for under 70 grand before on-road cost is really quite good. The rear-wheel drive motor, it's not sold in many places around the world, and the LFP battery is brand new, but the main characteristic that's different in terms of power between the rear-wheel drive and the dual motor all-wheel drive performance is that the rear-wheel drive just doesn't launch you off the line very hard. Its main characteristic in terms of performance, if I slow down, is that it accelerates really well from like 60 onwards, and you get this really lovely mid-range acceleration where it feels really quite fast in the mid-range, but off the line it doesn't hurtle you off the line like the performance does, and I think it might be software doing that. Of course we don't have all-wheel drive, so stability control is a thing, but I can't feel stability intervention. I feel like a hard launch is just not allowed in the rear-wheel drive, and we don't have lunatic mode for acceleration. We just have standard and chill. Tesla claims 6.9 seconds to 100 for the rear drive. Our best of 3, 7.15 seconds, so it's not that quick off the line, as you can see. It's not slow, but it's not going to blow you away. It's the mid-range acceleration that's good, but don't write the rear-wheel drive off just yet. Firstly, it's a lot cheaper than the performance. Secondly, it's more efficient than the performance. And thirdly, it's lighter and the handling is better, because the body control is already really quite tight in the rear drive, so it's not like you have to go to the performance in order to make it handle properly. It already handles really well in rear-wheel drive. It starts with a good steering rack, really lovely direct steering, mid-weighted steering. I like the job that Tesla have done on this part of the driving experience. It then leads on to good body control and a very level body when you're throwing it through corners. This car has lots of grip and it's light. Tesla says it's about 1,900 kilos. We weighed it and got 1,830, which is really impressive for an EV, particularly one with a range of in excess of 400 Ks WLTP. If a car's light-ish, it's going to handle properly. This car's lighter than a lot of combustion SUVs competing in its class, so that's awesome. The problem is the ride, and others have been saying this overseas for a long time, and it hasn't been fixed for the car that Tesla is delivering in Australia. If this car does have the upgraded suspension that the Giga Berlin construction is known for, you can't really tell because the damping feels unfinished. As I said, body control is good, it contains the body well, but this car isn't really heavy enough to need super hardcore heavy duty suspension, which is the feeling that you get in the Model Y. The suspension is really quite stiff over imperfections, you feel a lot of hard edges, and it's all translated through to the cabin in feel, but also in noise, particularly in the burbs where this car is so quiet, you hear a lot of suspension noise. And because of the double glazing on the windows, it's mostly noisy because of the suspension in the cabin, which amplifies the feeling of kind of crashiness that you get over bumps. And the rear wheel drive in particular kind of could have been more supple, I think. The performance, I get it. If you want to make it sort of an AMG, BMW M car rival, make it stiff, that's fine. But the rear wheel drive, this is the base model. It doesn't need to be super sporty all the time. We don't have adaptive dampers, we don't have air suspension, We've just got passive dampers, and unfortunately the setting that Tesla has gone for is not comfortable enough for my tastes. So I'd make sure to test drive the car if you're on the fence, or if you don't like a suspension that translates a lot of road feel in your family SUV, because you're going to want to try it first. By no means is it horrible or unacceptable or bad, it's just really quite firm, and you need to tell whether that's part of what you want in a car or if it's not quite comfy enough. Vehicles like the XC40 Recharge, EV6, Ioniq 5, BMW i4, BMW iX3 are all more supple than this vehicle, so it's a factor that you just need to take into consideration. Refinement though is generally good, braking is good, the one pedal driving is tuned well, there's selectable steering weights, and then on the safety front, this car has basic autopilot, not full self-driving. The adaptive cruise is quite smooth. The blind spot cameras, I really like those. The lane keep assist is excellent, but it disengages every time you change lanes, and that's part of the penalty for not having the $10,100 full self-driving option on this car. Interestingly, Tesla doesn't fit FSD to its corporate cars, and you don't have proper full self-driving in Australia because we're not in that stage of the beta. I would stress that full self-driving is just Tesla's marketing name for this technology. It hasn't been certified by the Australian government as being capable of such. So as a basic package, it's okay, but other cars go further, including with lane keep assist that doesn't disengage every time you hit the indicator. So that's the new Tesla Model Y, which has just launched here in Australia. For this money, just under $70,000 before on-road costs, no electric SUV really does it better, or at least none of this car's rivals demand this few compromises. If you want a fully electric family SUV, I actually do think you should get in the queue to order a Tesla Model Y. That being said, the new Model Y is not perfect. The suspension is still too rough, and many of its rivals, the Ioniq 5, the EV6, even the relatively firm XC40 Recharge, they're all more comfortable over bumps than this car. So Tesla needs to revise the suspension even further to make the Model Y as good as it could be. Also, there are those couple of squeaks inside that show that quality control still isn't perfect, but virtually everything else about this car, the performance, the efficiency, the charging network, the interior technology, and the packaging are all really excellent and make the Model Y quite easy for me to recommend. Hopefully that gives you a balanced view. You can sound off in the comments and let me know what you think about this Tesla SUV down below. While you're there, make sure you hit subscribe to Chasing Cars and the notification bell so you never miss our uploads. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.